Hey, here we are. Day 3. Also the second to last day of 2021, which is crazy to me. I keep being like, I don't know what day I think it is, but it doesn't seem like, oh my gosh, tomorrow's New Year's Eve. So, I don't know. It's just kind of blowing my mind. I don't know where 2021 went. And that's actually what I want to talk to you about. It's like today, this year, all of the things. And but before I get there, I'm so curious how the last few days have been. What did you guys come up with yesterday? Anything good? Any ways that you started to look at like where you can upgrade your life and where you can ask for the whipped cream? My friend came over yesterday and after listening to the live, she's like, I really wanted to go get coffee today just so I could ask for the upgrade. And I was like, oh, that's so fun. And like, are there places and spaces that you've come up with where you're like, oh, I wouldn't have even thought of that, but yeah, I'll take the next thing. I'll take, the extra $5 upgrade or the extra $1,000 upgrade, whatever that might be for you. And is that something you've looked at all? The other thing we talked about yesterday was just this presence of like what you've been choosing. And I know that's not always the most comfortable thing, but I'm curious if people came up with that. And I get that like that's maybe not something people are as likely to post about, and that's fine, but at least for you, if you haven't already done it, take the time to be very present with everything you've been choosing up to now and what you could choose differently as we go into the next year, as you go into the rest of your life. I mean, we tend to do this like New Year's thing where we're like, oh, like let's talk about New Year's resolutions, and we keep those for about a week, maybe 30 days, and then it's pretty much gone. So instead of it being like new year, new me, like what if it was like, okay, yeah, and like what can I choose just in the future going forward? What if it wasn't just gonna hang out for January? What could you actually choose now that is totally different than anything you've been willing to choose before? And what choices do you have available that are new and different and exciting? And what if it was excitement? So I've talked to a lot of people lately who've been going through a lot of change. This is just something that is coming up in my world. And there's a lot of change going on in the world, and a lot of people are choosing different things, choosing change, choosing to have more of them. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable. So if that's you, or if you know somebody who is going through that, what if all of the anxiety and the like what you've identified as fear and what this like scary unknown thing, what if none of that has to be scary, and what if it doesn't have to be anxiety provoking, but what if instead it is excitement for a world opening up that anything is truly possible? And what if that is actually that feeling in your body, that heart racing, stomach knots, all of those things that you've identified as anxiety or fear? What if that is actually the feeling of getting up to the top of the roller coaster, where it's excitement of knowing what's coming and yet not knowing what's coming at all? And if anything was truly possible, what could you choose? So if you haven't done your 100 asks from day 1, and I see people are still putting them in, do it. Even as like we end this challenge today, like if you think of it 3 days from now, throw it back in the group, because it creates something. It creates you really putting your asks into the universe. And also moving forward, I talked a little bit about this yesterday, about actually like creating asks as part of your daily routine, where like as you're going to bed at night or first thing in the morning, to take 5 minutes and just write as many asks as you can. So you can say, okay, here's my 10 asks for the day, or if you want to try to get to 100 every day, by all means, or set a 5-minute timer and just come up with as many as you can in that 5 minutes. What would your life be like if you were willing to take 5 minutes a day to ask for what you'd really like to have? So today, what I'd like to talk to you about, and yes, my voice still sounds like shit. I actually feel like it's worse today than it was yesterday, but I had wine last night, so maybe partially my fault. So, everything that is pot and pock. Like, I suppose all of this is a choice, right? So I'm not sure what the value of choosing this is, but I'll get there eventually. What I want to talk to you today is acknowledging you and acknowledging the last year, acknowledging how much you've changed, and acknowledging all the choices that you've already made. So when we don't acknowledge where we've actually gotten our asks, when we don't acknowledge where we have chosen greater, where we have chosen more of us, where we have chosen to be something different, what we do then is we sort of recreate it so that we can go back to the beginning and start over, and so that we can do it again because we didn't acknowledge it in the first place. So it's almost like it didn't happen. So what I'd really like you to do today is to look back on the last year, 5 years, whatever's late for you. For me, I sort of like to look back on the year and to look at like where I was at a year ago and what I've chosen in the last year that has created my life so differently than I ever thought possible. And most of us can be like, yeah, like a year ago, is this where I thought I'd be today? And sometimes it's kind of like, yeah, I, sort of met my targets and all the things, but a lot of times it's not. And a lot of times you didn't even really know what you were asking for at the time. And yet you chose and you chose and you chose to get you here. So this is kind of a list thing, and you can post it or don't, but I'd love it if you would actually like take some time and have gratitude for you and have gratitude for what your choices have been over the last year. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a year. It can be 5 years. It can be like over the last 6 months, whatever works. But really look at like where your asks have come to fruition, even if you didn't realize you were asking for them. And it might be that you were asking for more time with your family. Maybe that showed up because of all the COVID craziness. Maybe you were asking for more ease with your body, and like where has that shown up? And really look at like whatever it is that you kind of have been looking at and asking for over the last year, and like where it has already shown up and where you have already started to create this. And even if it's like, oh, well, I asked for this and it hasn't shown up yet, okay, but look at like where it has started to show up, where you are making different choices, where you have taken action towards that thing, even if it's like, you're on some kind of timeline spectrum and it's like you asked for the thing that's over here, but now you're here instead of here. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge where you have already chosen, where you've already started to create these asks, and where the universe has had your back. And when you acknowledge that and you're willing to have gratitude for yourself, for the universe, and for everything in between, it can create more of it. So when you stop and you're like, man, like, thank you, universe, for everything that I've asked you for, and it's already showing up, then more and more and more can show up, because the universe is like, oh, cool, you love that. I'll give you more of that. And if you don't, it's kind of like, all right, well, I guess you didn't notice, And so then it's like we go back and try to recreate it until we get it, until we actually see what we've created, until we get what our asks are creating. Because every time you ask for something, it does create. And so, but when you don't acknowledge it, you lose it. So acknowledge it. Acknowledge everything that's already shown up and everything that's already occurring that you've put into future motion. A year ago, today was the future. So what future can you create now with your asks if you acknowledge all the things that have already shown up, that you've already created? Leanne says, love this. I really require to look at this. Yeah, and how much do we not? I realize that a lot for myself. I ask for things, and it's so cool when you look back on your asks and you're like, wow, like so many of these things have shown up or are showing up. And a lot of us forget to do that. Or we don't, it's not even that we forget some of the times, it's like we brush it off. It's like we do this, yeah, okay, and now what? It's like we don't really acknowledge, like, man, like I asked for, like for myself, I can look back at a time where I worked in a job that I really wasn't happy in, but I thought I didn't have a choice. I thought I couldn't leave because I couldn't make the same amount of money anywhere else. And Leanne says so much, unwilling to acknowledge what I've created. Yeah, absolutely, because we don't. We go, especially as humanoids, we go for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's kind of how we're wired. And it's not wrong, but it would create so much more for ourselves if we can actually look at what's different. So like this job thing, I can look at, and it was maybe a year and a half ago where I was like, something has got to give. I've got to get out of this situation. And I was so afraid of it. And once I chose it, it was like, whoa, I chose the thing. But now, a year later, it's just become like a very regular, like, yeah, this is my life, this is my days. And I forget that there was a time that I was really unhappy and that I had to choose something different for that to occur, and really acknowledge that. And that's like a big thing, right? That's like leaving a job I was really unhappy in. But there's all these little things, all the things that it's like, wow, I was asking to have, I'm trying to think of an example even, more like communion and connection with the people in my life. And I've asked for like new playmates to show up, new like fun friends and people to play in my business, and like all of the ways that that has shown up that I like didn't even think about or acknowledge or didn't really like take the time to look at. And so like what are all the things that like if you go back and just for ease sake, go back a year, look where you were this time last year going into 2021 and acknowledge all the things that have actually shown up, that have changed, that you've chosen, that has created. And even if sometimes you're like, well, that was an interesting choice, like it isn't the choice that you would have liked to chosen, or you don't like how it showed up, or like anywhere you've judged it, please also acknowledge that sometimes things have to kind of get weird and wonky and confusing in order to create the future that you'd like to have. And so even where you go into the like wrongness of you, instead, what if you didn't judge you? And what if you looked at a choice that you're like, well, that was interesting, and instead of judging it, we're like, hey, and what did that choice create? So even if I don't love how this showed up in the moment, did it create something greater? And is it still creating something greater? Leanne says, finalized my separation, moved to a new town, and bought a house and a car, just a few things. That's awesome. And have you acknowledged that? Have you acknowledged that you moved to a new town, got a new house, got a car? Like, holy hell. But so many of these things, like, we go through life and we're just like, yeah, next, next, next. And we don't actually acknowledge, like, oh, wow, my entire life has changed. I've created so much difference because I can. And what can you choose now if you acknowledge everything that you've already created up to this point? So I really want you to like look at this and acknowledge what you've created and acknowledge the power and the potency and the difference of you. And that is something that most of us won't look at. We don't think we're different. We tend to look around at everybody else and we try really hard to fit in with everybody else. We try to talk about things that are relatable. We try to like fit in with this reality so much. And we don't actually acknowledge the difference of us and the difference that our choices can make and can be, where so many other people aren't choosing what you're choosing. And even if you've made some part of that wrong, acknowledge how different you are, acknowledge what you're willing to choose, what you're willing to be, and what vital, how do I want to word this? Like no, words aren't coming. The way that your difference impacts the world. How vital your difference is to the future of the planet. And that when you acknowledge that, when you acknowledge everything you've chosen up to now, everything that you are currently choosing and asking for, guys, 90% of the planet, 99% of the planet is not doing this right now. They're not looking at like, what can I ask for? What is possible? What can I have that I didn't even know I could have? What is possible for the planet? What is possible for the future? And how can we ask for that? And what action can we take for that to show up? And really choosing it. How many people do you know that aren't doing this? You know, I mean, I can look at so many conversations I find myself sort of stuck in. So many people that I've talked to who are like, well, no, I'll never leave my job. I'll never do anything different because it's fine. I hear a lot of it's fine. And how many other people hear that too? Like, it's not what I'd love to do. It's not great, but it's fine. This relationship I'm in, whatever, it's fine. This thing going on with my kid, whatever that is, it's fine. And we do a lot of that. We do a lot of complacency and a lot of like, I can just deal with it. I can just handle it instead of asking for greater. But you here listening to this, choosing greater, writing down your asks, asking for greater, asking for more, asking for a different future. We are the ones that actually create that for the planet. We are the ones that create that for the world because we're willing to ask for something different. So please, please, please acknowledge that. Acknowledge the difference of you. Acknowledge the difference that you be by everything you've chosen up to now and everything that you're willing to ask for that other people aren't willing to ask for. And what can we be as we go into 2022 that is totally different, totally fun and playful and joyful? And what if you were willing to be the joy that this planet is truly asking for? Because that is one of the things that more than anything I see lacking. And not when I am, taking an access class or doing these or hanging out with people that really light my world up. But as I look out into the world, people are lacking joy. There's so much monotony and sadness and darkness. And what if what's really required now is being the difference and being the joy and the fun and the laughter and the play and inviting other people to that, where people are like, wow, you're really weird and different. I'll have some of that. And what would it take to be the people on the planet that are actually creating more of that? So I don't know what else to say about all this. As we go into, asking for greater, asking for a different future, and what is truly possible now, today, that has never been possible before right now. I have a How to Become Money workbook class, whatever you call that. I don't even know. Book club. There we go. Starting tomorrow. And I am so excited to have more of these conversations. It is 10 weeks of asking for greater. It is 10 weeks of turning up your asks, I think is what I actually titled the class. And going through the How to Become Money workbook, looking at everything that we've made money and all the significance we've put on it and all the ways that we've kept it from us, and clearing all of that shit out and actually creating the life we'd like to have. Money creates space. Money creates, having money is one of the things, at least, that is required to create a greater future. So if we were willing to have money, if we were willing to truly have money, what future could we create? So I would absolutely love it if you would join me on that. We start tomorrow at 10 a.m. Yes, my voice will probably still sound like this tomorrow, but hopefully by next week it'll be better. Thankfully, we have 10 weeks. And the only prereq is that you have the book. And if you don't have it now, you can order it and have it by next week. No big deal. Invite your friends to this. Invite people who maybe don't have an access consciousness background, who are asking for something different. Because one of the beauties of the How to Become Money workbook, not only does it create money and create really turning up your ass, create what the life that you're asking for, but it's a great introduction to these tools. I don't know if you guys know this, but the How to Become Money workbook used to be the foundation before foundation was foundation. I didn't know that until semi-recently. I don't remember where I learned that, but that was the original foundation for Access Consciousness. And it's so fun now to look back and be like, oh man, I see the origin of these tools and how relevant it still is in our world and what we can create. So I think the link's in here, but I will pop it again below the video so you can join me there. It's only $149, you guys, for 10 weeks of calls. That's $14, $15, whatever that comes to. I guess $14.90 a week, or a call, or however you want to look at that, which is kind of unheard of. So I would really love it if you joined me. And I'm so grateful that you guys came with me on this 3-day journey of asking for greater as we go into the new year. And I will talk to you all very soon. All right.